All right, everybody, I'm coming to you from a Thursday afternoon. I actually meant to get this out last night, but had some technical difficulties. That's the way it is. Right now, I'm actually just getting ready to finish up the teaching that's going to be published this Sunday morning. It's going to be the beginning of a brand new series called The Upside Down Kingdom, that's all about answering the question, what does it mean to follow Jesus? What should that life look like? Which I'm really excited about. But right now, I just wanted to take a few minutes and spend some time in Psalm chapter 9 with you, if you'd let me. So let me go ahead and read that on the front end. It says, I will thank Yahweh with all my heart. I will declare all your wonderful works. I'll rejoice and boast about you. I'll sing about your name, Most High. When my enemies retreat, they stumble and perish before you, for you have upheld my cause. You're seated on your throne as a righteous judge. You have rebuked the nations. You have destroyed the wicked. You have erased their name forever and ever. The enemy has come to eternal ruin. You have uprooted the cities, and the very memory of them has perished. But the Lord sits enthroned forever. He's established his throne for judgment. He judges the world with righteousness. He executes judgments on the nations with fairness. The Lord is a refuge for the oppressed, a refuge in times of trouble. Those who know your name trust in you, because you've not abandoned those who seek you, Yahweh. Sing to the Lord who dwells in Zion. Proclaim his deeds among the nations. For the one who seeks an accounting for bloodshed remembers them. He does not forget the cry of the afflicted. Be gracious to me, Lord. Consider my affliction at the hands of those who hate me. Lift me up from the gates of death, so that I may declare all your praises. I'll rejoice in your salvation within the gates of daughter Zion. The nations have fallen into the pit they made. Their foot is caught in the net they have concealed. The Lord has revealed himself. He has executed justice, striking down the wicked by the works of their hands. Salah. The wicked will return to Sheol, all the nations that forget God, for the oppressed will not always be forgotten. The hope of the afflicted will not perish forever. Rise up, Lord. Do not let man prevail. Let the nations be judged in your presence. Put terror in them, Lord. Let them know they are only men. Salah. So the first thing that's all through this psalm that it shows me about God that I adore, a picture of it is found in verse 12, which tells us that God does not forget the cry of the afflicted. What this psalm is really written to remind us of, that we see so often in so many psalms, is that even through the hardest times in our lives, even when we are afflicted, even when we feel oppressed, even when we're experiencing injustice, even when we feel forgotten, that we're not. And that when we cry out, even when we feel unheard by God, which I think is something that every one of us has experienced a time or two in our lives. Certainly, the psalmist does a number of times throughout Psalms. What this reminds us of is that regardless of what we feel and regardless of what we think, that we are not forgotten, because God is a God who does not forget the cry of the afflicted, which is something that I think the more deeply we understand, the more we find that to be a source of strength in the hardest times of our lives. That's what I see about God that I adore in this psalm. What I see about me, what this causes me to reflect on in me and have to admit about me, is that I don't do what David does all through this psalm. See, this psalm in so many ways, it's obviously David going through something really difficult, which is what really most of the psalms are all about. It's the psalmist going through something really difficult, but all through this psalm, David does something that I don't do enough, and that is remind himself of who God really is, which is, I think, one of the most powerful things that we can do. And when we look around and the world's not making sense to us, and our mind's playing tricks on us, and our emotions are, up on the mountain and then down in the valley and in between, one of the most stabilizing things that we can do is just remind ourselves of who God is. And all through this psalm, that's what David is doing. He reminds himself that God is this righteous judge who rules in righteousness, and he rules in fairness, and he cares about injustice. And one day he will make sure that justice wins out. He cares for the oppressed. He cares for the afflicted. He doesn't forget them. He just reminds himself over and over again of who God is, which is something that I know I don't do enough, and I have to admit that I don't do enough in my own life. But lastly, what I see in this psalm that I really aspire to see in my life is just right here in verse 1. I read it so quickly you might not have even noticed it. This whole psalm begins in verse 1 with David saying, I will thank Yahweh with all my heart. I will declare all your wonderful works. See, what this psalm can do when we understand what it's saying is it can help us develop thankfulness in our hearts. And it begins with David declaring all of the wonderful works of the Lord and thanking God for all that God had done in his life. And I think that's really that thankfulness that discipline can generate really winds up being a shield around our hearts when life gets difficult. And so what I see in this psalm that I'm reminded of is just all the times in my life that God has been so obviously faithful to me that I haven't noticed it and I haven't appreciated it like I should have. And actually, a number of times throughout my life, I kind of have this story. It's a story of my own life, of the things that God has done for me at these really pivotal moments in my life along the way. And what I like to do from time to time is just tell that story out loud to remind myself of how faithful God has been. In other words, to thank Yahweh with all my heart and declare all of his wonderful works in my life. Because I don't know about you, but maybe you can relate to this. There have been so many times in my life where I was so down and I felt so defeated and I was so discouraged and I was so just at the bottom and at the end of me, where right then and there God has met me by either bringing me the right book or putting the right idea in my mind, or bringing the right friend in my life, or just giving me some kind of encounter and awareness of his presence. And I think the best thing that we can do when we're struggling in the present is remember the faithfulness of God in the past. That's what this psalm is really all about, and it's what I aspire to do more and more in my life. So with that, I'm going to pray. Father, thank you that you're a God who does not forget the cry of the afflicted, that regardless of how we feel and regardless of how life seems, that you don't forget your children. It doesn't mean that we're not going to experience affliction. It doesn't mean that we're not going to experience difficulty in this life. But the hope that we hold on to is that you don't forget us. You haven't forgotten about us. You never will. Not for any of your children. God, in the hardest times in our lives, when we're having trouble making sense of what we're going through, please help us, first off, to remind ourselves of who you are, that you are a judge who is righteous, that you judge with fairness, that you care about the affliction of people, the oppression of people. You are a pioneer of justice. You invented it. It comes from you. You care very deeply about injustice. And in and through that, God, please make us the kind of people that over and over again develop the daily habit throughout our lives of thanking you for all that you've done and reminding ourselves of your wonderful works in our lives. Not just the moment that you saved us, but all the little moments that your hand has been with us when we haven't even recognized it or taken the time to dwell on it. Because if every single one of us would go back through our past more, what we would find is your unseen hand guiding us, steering us, protecting us, caring for us. And remembering that, remembering how faithful you've been in the past, gives us strength in the present and hope for the future. It's in the holy name of your Son, Jesus, we pray. Amen.